In the farthest reaches of the Andromeda expanse, where stars blinked like sleepy eyes and galaxies spun in silent dances, there stood a palace so grand it seemed carved from the bones of dying suns. The royal palace of Zinthra rose on a cliff of violet crystal, its spires piercing the thin atmosphere of the planet Xylos 9, a world bathed in perpetual twilight and lit by twin moons that wept silver light onto the obsidian courtyards below. This was the seat of the High Dominion, a union of 12 star systems ruled by an iron-fisted council obsessed with purity, strength, and genetic supremacy. And at the heart of this cold empire sat Princess Lyriel, daughter of the late Empress Vorin, green-skinned, white-haired, and, by every standard of her people, disgracefully weak. Lyriel had been born under a cursed constellation, they said, the kind that only appears once every 1,000 years, when the sky splits open and whispers secrets no one dares to hear. Her skin shimmered faintly in the dark, a soft jade glow that made her look more like a ghost than a warrior. Her hair fell in long, silken waves the color of moonlight on snow, always drifting as if underwater even when still. But what truly marked her as an outcast among her kin was not her appearance. It was her lack of power. While other Zinthrans could shatter mountains with their minds or survive vacuum exposure for days, Lyriel couldn't even lift a ceremonial dagger without trembling. She fainted during combat drills. She cried when she saw injured animals. Once, she'd stopped a war council just to save a wounded sky lizard caught in a security net. To the Dominion, such compassion was not virtue, it was contamination. So when the council declared her betrothed, not to a noble house, not to a general, not even to a prince, but to a human, it wasn't seen as honor. It was punishment, a public humiliation wrapped in diplomatic ceremony. Humans, to the Zinthrans, were primitive, fragile, emotional, short-lived creatures who still argued over borders on their single home rock, while the rest of the galaxy soared through wormholes and weaponized black holes. Marrying one was beneath insulting. It was degradation, and yet the law allowed it. Ancient treaties signed during the Interstellar Accord stated that any royal deemed unfit for sovereign duties could be wed to a foreign entity as part of a cultural exchange program. A polite way of saying, get rid of her quietly. So Lyriel was packed into a gravity-sled carriage lined with frozen orchids, her favorite, shipped across 3 sectors, past asteroid graveyards and pirate fleets, until she landed on Earth, a blue-green marble spinning lazily in the Sol system. Her groom awaited her not in some glittering capital, but in a modest stone house nestled between rolling hills and wildflower fields in a place called Devon, England. He was not a king, not a soldier, not even particularly famous. His name was Silas Reed, a botanist of all things, tall, lean, with sun-browned skin and messy chestnut hair that refused to stay combed. He wore wool sweaters even in summer and spoke to plants like they answered back. When the council's emissaries first presented him as the chosen husband, they'd laughed. Even Lyriel, peering at his image on the holoscreen, had thought, this is a joke. But the decree was sealed in quantum code and stamped with the sigil of the Dominion. There would be no appeal. The wedding took place under a drizzle of rain and a confused flock of starlings. No fanfare, no crowds, just a nervous priest, 2 witnesses, one of whom was Silas's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Pendergast, who brought a casserole, and a hovering Zinthran drone recording everything for the council's archives. Lyriel wore a gown woven from liquid starlight thread, its hem trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Silas wore a slightly too tight suit he'd borrowed from his brother. They exchanged vows in both Galactic Standard and Old English, though neither fully understood the other's words. When the priest said, "I now pronounce you man and wife," Silas grinned, scratched his neck and said, "Well, suppose we should have tea?" That night, the air in the cottage was thick with awkwardness. Rain tapped gently against the windows. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the bookshelves crammed with soil manuals and alien flora studies. Lyriel sat stiffly on the edge of the bed in her silk nightgown, hands folded in her lap, staring at the wooden floor like it might swallow her whole. She had heard stories, terrible whispered tales, of what humans did on wedding nights. Brutal, aggressive, primal things. She braced herself, her heart thumping so hard it vibrated through her ribcage. She didn't fear pain, not really. She feared shame, being broken, being proven once and for all that she was nothing. When Silas entered the room, he wasn't what she expected. He didn't lunge. He didn't growl. He paused in the doorway holding 2 mugs. "Hot chocolate?" he asked softly. "With extra marshmallows. My mom always said it helps with big life changes." Lyriel blinked. "You, Drink melted sugar before mating rituals? Silas choked on a laugh. Mating ritual? Blimey, no. I mean, well, yes, eventually, maybe if you want, but not tonight. Not unless you're ready. And honestly, I've got no idea what your people do, but here we usually talk first. Get to know each other. Unless you're tired. Then we can just sleep. Or watch telly. I've got Planet Earth on DVD. David Attenborough's voice puts me right out. She stared at him. This human, who smelled faintly of moss and laundry soap, was offering her hot chocolate and nature documentaries instead of conquest. It made no sense. In her world, marriage was transactional, political, often cruel. Affection was weakness. Kindness, a flaw. Yet here he was, treating her like someone fragile, yes, but also like someone precious. Tears welled in her silver eyes. One slipped down her cheek, glowing faintly as it fell. Silas froze. Oh, did I say something wrong? I'm rubbish at this, aren't I? Look, I know this is mad. You're a princess from another galaxy and I grow tulips for a living. But I promised the council I'd treat you with respect. And I meant it. It's not that, Lyriel whispered. No one has ever offered me a choice. He sat beside her, carefully, giving her space, and handed her a mug. Their fingers brushed. A tiny spark jumped between them like static but warmer. She gasped. He yanked his hand back. Sorry, must be the carpet. Dry air. But Lyriel felt it too. The hum beneath her skin, the sudden warmth in her chest, as if something deep inside her had recognized him. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something ancient, something buried in the genes of her species, stirring after centuries of dormancy. Later, when they lay side by side under the quilt, not touching but close enough to feel each other's breath, Silas said, You know, my gran used to tell me stories about stardust brides, women who fell from the sky and married farmers, said they brought miracles. Crops grew overnight, sick animals healed, storms calmed when they sang. Lyriel turned her head to look at him in the dim light. And did you believe her? He smiled. Didn't matter. Made the stories worth telling. She didn't sleep much that night. Her mind raced. She thought of the council laughing, of her cousins sneering, of the cold silence of the palace halls. But then she thought of Silas, handing her a mug with shaky hands, trying so hard to be kind. And she thought of the spark, the impossible electric pull between them. Was it possible? Could a Zinthran, even a weak one, bond with a human? The old text spoke of cross-species resonance, rare and unstable, but powerful beyond measure. Legends said such unions could awaken dormant abilities. Abilities tied not to brute force, but to harmony, to balance, to life itself. By morning, something had shifted. Not in the world, but in her. She rose early, barefoot on the cool wooden floor, and stepped outside. Dew clung to the grass. Birds chirped. And the garden, Silas's garden, burst with colors so vivid they hurt her eyes. Flowers she'd never seen before twisted toward the dawn, petals unfurling like waking hands. She knelt, touched the soil. It pulsed faintly beneath her fingers. A vine curled around her wrist, gentle as a whisper. Silas found her there, covered in pollen and smiling. You're good with them, he said. They like you. I think they're responding to me, she said slowly. Like I'm part of the soil. He shrugged. Maybe you are. We're all made of stardust, aren't we? That day they began to build something new. Not a marriage of duty, but one of curiosity. Of small gestures. He taught her how to plant marigolds. She taught him how to breathe in zero-gravity meditation. He made her pancakes shaped like planets. She fixed his leaky faucet using sonic vibrations from her palms. Something she hadn't known she could do until she got annoyed at the dripping. But peace never lasts long when empires are watching. 3 weeks after the wedding, the sky above Devon split open with a sound like tearing metal. A Zinthran war cruiser, obsidian black and shaped like a blade, descended through the clouds, casting a shadow over the village. Its engines hummed with contained fury. From its belly dropped a delegation led by Commander Forlag, Lyriel's cousin. A mountain of muscle with crimson eyes and a cybernetic jaw that clicked when he spoke. We have come to retrieve the disgraced princess, he announced to the gathered villagers, who stood clutching pitchforks and mobile phones. The union is nullified. The experiment has failed. Silas stepped forward, hands up. She doesn't want to go. Forlag sneered. She is not permitted once. Lyriel emerged from the cottage, wearing one of Silas's oversized jumpers and muddy boots. She looked small next to the armored soldiers, but her voice rang clear. I am not returning. I am staying. You are weak, Forelag spat. A blemish on our bloodline. You cannot even defend yourself. I don't need to, she said. I have him. Forelag laughed. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he summoned a plasma whip, its tip crackling with blue fire. Then let us see how well your human protects you. Before Silas could move, the whip lashed out. Lyriel screamed, but not in fear. In rage. Time slowed. A pulse erupted from her body. Invisible but immense. The ground trembled. Every plant in the garden surged upward. Vines exploding like whips, wrapping around the soldiers' legs, yanking them off their feet. Flowers bloomed in seconds, their petals hardening into crystalline shields that deflected energy blasts. Trees bent, roots rising like serpents, entangling the war drones before they could fire. And Lyriel, she glowed, not faintly but brilliantly. Her green skin burned with emerald light, her white hair floating as if underwater. Her eyes, once soft and uncertain, now blazed with power. Forelag staggered back. Impossible. You're supposed to be powerless. I was never weak, she said, voice echoing with something deeper than sound. I was misunderstood. My strength isn't destruction. It's growth. Life answers to me. Silas watched, stunned, as his wife, his quiet, tea-drinking, flower-loving wife, raised her hand. The earth responded. Grass shot up in walls. Roses grew thorns the size of daggers. A willow tree uprooted itself and swung a branch like a club, knocking a soldier cold. The battle lasted minutes. The Zinthrans, trained for war, were undone by nature itself. Their weapons fizzled in the damp air. Their armor rusted as moss spread across it in seconds. By the time the cruiser powered up to retreat, half its crew was trapped in cocoons of ivy, and Forelag was dangling upside down from a pear tree, cursing in 4 languages. When silence returned, the villagers erupted in cheers. Mrs. Pendergast clapped and said, "Told you she was special. I saw it in her aura." Silas walked to Lyriel, who stood panting, the glow fading from her skin. You saved us." She looked at him, tears in her eyes. "You saved me first." That night, they didn't talk about war or politics or distant empires. They sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, eating toast with jam. Outside, the garden hummed with new energy. Flowers pulsed gently, as if breathing. Silas leaned his head against hers. "So, does this mean you're like a plant wizard now?" She giggled, a sound so rare it startled both of them. "Something like that." "Brilliant," he said. "We'll make a killing at the county fair." But the victory was short-lived. 2 days later, a signal arrived not from Zinthra, but from deep space. Encrypted, urgent, pulsing with a frequency only Lyriel could hear. It came from the Edge Nebula, a forbidden zone littered with dead ships and gravitational anomalies. The message was fragmented, repeating in a loop. Survivors, prison moon, children, bloodline. Lyriel paled. "It's coming from the Hollow Vault," she whispered. "A secret Dominion facility, where they send those who oppose the council. Political prisoners, dissidents, and families of traitors." Silas frowned. "You think someone's alive out there?" "My aunt," she said. "My mother's sister." She spoke against the council's cruelty. "They erased her from history. I thought she was dead. And now you're hearing her?" "She's not sending the signal," Lyriel said, eyes wide. "It's the planet itself. The Hollow Vault isn't just a prison. It's alive. And it's calling to me." Silas stared into the fire. He thought of his quiet life, his greenhouse, his lectures at the university, his Sunday roasts. Then he looked at Lyriel, whose hands could make forests rise in seconds, whose heart had softened his own in ways he couldn't explain. "Well," he said, standing up and stretching, "suppose we'd better get the car packed. Can't have your family stuck in a haunted space jail, can we?" "You're not afraid?" she asked. He gave her a crooked smile. "Afraid? Course I am. But you're terrifyingly powerful now, and I've got a very good map app. Between the two of us, we'll manage." They left 2 weeks later after preparing in secret. Silas sold his house, bought a second-hand interstellar camper van. It had belonged to a retired Venusian jazz musician and still smelled of lavender and trumpet polish, and retrofitted it with navigation systems, oxygen recyclers, and a mini greenhouse for Lyriel's experimental seedlings. She, in turn, taught him basic survival skills: how to purify water with sound, how to sense gravitational shifts, how to meditate in zero-G. Their journey took them through asteroid markets run by three-eyed traders, past nebulae that sang in harmonic frequencies, and into the wreckage of ancient civilizations buried in ice. Along the way, Lyriel's powers grew. She learned to communicate with ecosystems, to heal barren worlds with a touch, to summon storms of pollen that disarmed hostile drones. Silas, meanwhile, became her anchor, her translator, her strategist, her laughter in the dark. One night, as they floated above a dying red dwarf, he asked, "Do you ever miss the palace?" She gazed out the window at the swirling cosmos. "I miss the gardens, the singing fountains, but not the cold, not the silence. Here with you I feel real." He took her hand. "Good, because I've got terrible news." "What?" "The van's oven is broken. We might have to eat freeze-dried noodles for the next 6 months." She groaned. "Monster." He kissed her forehead. "Your monster." When they finally reached the Edge Nebula, the hollow vault loomed ahead. A moon-sized prison built into the core of a dead planet, its surface scarred with towers and shield domes. Automated sentinels patrolled the orbit, firing on anything that approached. But Lyriel closed her eyes and sang, a low, melodic hum that resonated with the planet's crust. Slowly, impossibly, the ground answered. Roots, ancient and massive, stirred beneath the surface. Vines burst through steel plating. Trees erupted from landing pads, toppling defense turrets. They landed in chaos. Inside, the prison was a maze of cryochambers and interrogation rooms. The air reeked of antiseptic and sorrow. But life, real, stubborn life, had taken root. Moss crept along the walls. Fungi glowed in the vents. And in the deepest chamber, they found her. Aunt Neral, frail but alive, her green skin faded, her white hair thin, but her eyes sharp with recognition. "Lyriel," she whispered, "the bloom has awakened." "What's the bloom?" Silas asked. Neral smiled. "Our legend, the one who doesn't conquer with weapons, but with life, who turns deserts into forests, prisons into sanctuaries. They tried to bury it in our bloodline, but it was always waiting. For you." Lyriel looked at Silas, then at her aunt, then at the crumbling walls being devoured by ivy. "Then it's time," she said, "to bloom." They freed the prisoners, hundreds of them, from dozens of species, all silenced by the Dominion. Some could barely walk. Others wept at the sight of sunlight. Silas organized supplies, rigged communication devices, and somehow managed to brew tea using recycled coolant and dried mint from his pocket. As they prepared to leave, alarms blared. Reinforcements were coming. A fleet of Dominion destroyers, led by none other than High Commander Korath himself, the man who had sentenced Lyriel to exile. Outside, the sky darkened with warships. But Lyriel stepped forward, arms raised. She didn't summon weapons. She didn't call for violence. Instead, she sang. And the planet answered. Roots tore through hulls. Forests erupted from hangar bays. Flowers bloomed in cockpits, disabling controls with sweet, suffocating beauty. The fleet, mighty and merciless, was swallowed not by fire, but by life. When the last ship fell silent, drifting like a leaf on a breeze, Lyriel turned to the survivors. "We're not going back to hide," she said. "We're going to rebuild, not with fear, not with force, but with growth, with care, with love." Silas stood beside her, grinning like a madman. "And decent plumbing. Can't run a revolution without working toilets." The journey home was different, not in escape but in triumph. News of the Hollow Vault's fall spread like wildfire across the sectors. Rebellions sparked. Colonies declared independence. The Dominion, for the first time in centuries, trembled. And in a quiet valley on Earth, where flowers never stopped blooming and the air always smelled of rain and honey, a new flag rose, one of green leaves on a field of starlight. But far away, in the deepest void, something stirred. An ancient signal pulsed, older than the Dominion, older than Zinthra itself. It whispered not in words, but in hunger. And it was growing louder. As the seasons turned on Earth, so too did the tides of fate across the stars. The bond between Lyriel and Silas deepened with every trial, every quiet moment beneath the moonlight, every shared sunrise over the dew-kissed hills of Devon. What had begun as an arranged union, a political slap, a cosmic joke, had become something no prophecy, no law, no cold logic of the Dominion could explain. A love that defied galaxies. They returned from the Hollow Vault not as fugitives, but as symbols. Whispers spread through starports and refugee camps, across data nets and forgotten radio waves. The green princess walks with life itself. And her human husband? He holds her hand while she reshapes worlds. Some called them saviors, others threats. But none could deny the truth blooming in their wake. Wherever they went, barren soil sprouted green, dying ecosystems revived, and hope, long buried under tyranny, cracked open like a seed in spring rain. Back on Earth, they didn't live in palaces or command centers. They rebuilt the cottage, now surrounded by a garden so vast it looked like a jungle had swallowed the countryside. Trees bent gracefully to shade walking paths. Flowers chimed softly in the wind, their petals reflecting starlight even at noon. Bees the size of sparrows hummed ancient Zinthran lullabies. Silas, ever the scientist, documented it all in a leather-bound journal titled, How My Wife Accidentally Rewrote Biology. He still wore his old wool sweaters, though now they were patched with fabric grown from living vines that repaired themselves when torn. Lyriel, once trembling in fear of her own shadow, stood tall, her presence radiating calm, strength, and a quiet wisdom that made even visiting alien diplomats pause before speaking. She no longer hid her glow. When she walked barefoot through the fields, grass rose to kiss her ankles. Storms parted around her. Animals followed her like pilgrims. Yet, for all her power, it was Silas who grounded her. When nightmares of the palace haunted her sleep, he held her and whispered stories of silly human inventions, like socks that don't match, or dogs that wear sweaters. When the weight of leadership pressed down, he'd take her hand and say, "Come on, then, let's go feed the glowing badger again." And somehow that always helped. Their love wasn't loud. It didn't need grand declarations or fiery battles to prove itself. It lived in the small things. How he always left a mug of hot chocolate by her side when she meditated. How she wove tiny blossoms into his hair while he napped in the sun. How they danced in the kitchen to crackling vinyl records of 1950s rock and roll, laughing as the plants swayed along with them. But the universe, never one to rest, tested them again. Word reached them of a dying world, Elora 7, a planet suffocating under a synthetic smog dome erected by rogue Dominion loyalists. Its people, amphibious beings with gills like silver lace, were vanishing, their oceans turning to sludge. No fleet would go near it. The atmosphere was poison, the surface crawling with automated death drones. Silas looked at Lyriel after reading the distress signal. "We have to go." She nodded. "Even if they fear me?" "Especially then," he said. "Because you're not here to conquer. You're here to heal." They arrived in the retrofitted camper van, now affectionately renamed the Bloom Wagon, and landed in the dead heart of Elora's last city. Ruins stretched in every direction. The sky was a sickly orange. Nothing grew. Nothing moved. But Lyriel stepped out, barefoot on the cracked earth, and placed her palm on the ground. First, nothing happened. Then a tremor. A single shoot pushed through the ash. Then another. And another. Vines surged from the cracks, wrapping around drone towers, pulling them down like ivy reclaiming an old wall. Trees burst upward, their roots purifying the soil, their leaves releasing oxygen in great shimmering waves. Rivers, long buried, reappeared, fed by underground springs awakened by her song. Within days, color returned. Within weeks, fish swam again. Birds, real ones, not machines, circled overhead. The people emerged from hiding, weeping, touching the green grass as if afraid it would vanish. Children laughed for the first time in years. And when they bowed to Lyriel, calling her mother of renewal, she knelt and touched their foreheads one by one. "You saved yourselves," she said. "You endured. That is the greatest strength of all." Silas stood nearby, handing out sandwiches. He'd packed pickles and chutney for the occasion, and teaching kids how to grow beans in recycled cans. One little girl with webbed fingers tugged his sleeve and asked, "Are you the hero?" He chuckled. "Nah, I'm just the bloke who married the real one." Back home, the galaxy watched. The Dominion, fractured and faltering, sent envoys, not with weapons, but with scrolls of negotiation. Even Forlag, rescued from the pear tree and stripped of rank, sent a message carved on a leaf. "I see now. Forgive me." Lyriel didn't respond with anger. She sent back a seed, one from the oldest tree in her garden, with a note, "Plant this. Watch what grows." Years passed. The couple never sought a throne, but one formed around them anyway, not of gold or iron, but of intertwined roots and stardust. A new alliance rose, not ruled by force, but nurtured by balance. The verdant concordance. Planets joined freely, drawn not by conquest, but but by healing. Forests regrew on scorched worlds. Peace treaties were signed beneath flowering arches that bloomed only when both parties spoke truth. And through it all, Lyriel and Silas remained exactly who they had always been. Two souls who found each other in the chaos of the cosmos and chose kindness over power, love over pride. One evening, as they sat on a hill watching twin moons rise, Silas rested his head on her shoulder. "Do you think they'll tell stories about us someday?" She smiled, threading her fingers through his. "Probably, though I doubt they'll get it right. They'll say I was some warrior queen, and you were a fearless soldier. And what's the truth?" She kissed his temple. "The truth is, you were a man who offered me hot chocolate when I was terrified. And I was a princess who finally learned she wasn't weak, just different. And together, we proved that gentleness can move mountains. One seed at a time." He squeezed her hand. "Still think the council's watching?" "Always," she said. "But let them watch. Let the whole universe see." And so they did. For generations after, children across 100 worlds would hear the tale. Not of a mighty conqueror, nor a damsel saved, but of a green-skinned princess and a humble botanist who changed the universe simply by loving each other, proving that the strongest force in existence wasn't plasma cannons or psychic might, it was a heart that dared to care. And somewhere, in a cottage wrapped in blooming jasmine, two souls still sit by the fire, hands entwined, as the stars whisper their names into the endless night. As the years unfolded like the petals of some vast, celestial flower, Lyriel and Silas found that their love didn't just change galaxies. It grew. In the quiet rhythm of mornings warmed by tea steam and evenings lit by fireflies that glowed in harmony with Lyriel's skin, life blossomed in the most beautiful way possible, through children. Their first child came not with fanfare from the stars, but in the hush of a spring dawn, in the cottage surrounded by whispering vines. A baby girl, her skin a soft emerald hue like her mother's, but her wild tufts of hair a sunlit chestnut like Silas's. She was born under a shower of falling blossoms, roses opening midair as if celebrating, and when she cried for the first time, every plant in the valley turned toward the sound. They named her Marin, which meant tender light in Old Zinthran. She was only the beginning. One by one, their family grew, not in haste, but like seasons turning, each child arriving with their own quiet miracle. There was Kalo, their son with eyes like moonlit moss and the rare gift of speaking to birds, who would sit silently in the garden and listen as flocks told him secrets of distant lands. Then came little Nissa, whose laughter made flowers bloom instantly wherever she toddled, often leaving trails of daisies across the lawn. Next, twins, Elia and Rin, born during a meteor shower, one calm and thoughtful like Silas, the other bright and fearless like Lyriel, already showing signs of being able to coax water from dry soil. By the time their sixth child arrived, a wide-eyed boy they named Tove, born on a night when the auroras danced in colors never seen before, the cottage had long since expanded, not with bricks and mortar, but with living wood. Trees had grown around it, their trunks weaving into walls, their branches forming high ceilings where glowing moths nested. Vines curled into staircases. Windows bloomed open in the morning and closed at dusk. It was no longer just a home. It was a sanctuary, breathing and humming with quiet magic. They moved deeper into the countryside, to a hidden valley nestled between misty hills and a crystal-clear river that sang when the wind passed over its stones. There, far from warships and political schemes, they built a life rooted in peace. No guards, no titles, no decrees, just the rustle of leaves, the giggle of children chasing butterflies with wings like stained glass, and the smell of bread baking in the oven while Silas hummed off-key tunes from Earth's past. Lyriel taught the children how to listen to the earth, how to heal a wounded tree with a touch, how to sing to the rain so it fell gently. Silas showed them how to grow potatoes in Martian soil simulators, how to identify constellations, and, most importantly, how to make the perfect s'more over a campfire without setting your eyebrows on fire. Their days were simple, full, and rich. The eldest, Marin, began traveling sometimes, to worlds still healing from war, carrying seeds from her mother's garden and stories from Earth. She didn't go as a conqueror or even a leader, but as a gardener, planting forests where cities had burned, teaching others that strength could be quiet, that power could nurture instead of destroy. And whenever she returned, the whole family would gather beneath the great willow, the one that had started as a sapling the day Lyriel first kissed Silas on Earth, and share meals under its shimmering leaves. Mrs. Pendergast, now well into her 90s and stubbornly refusing to retire, still visited every summer with her famous casserole and tales of village gossip, always ending with, "I knew you lot were destined for greatness. Mark my words, they'll write songs about you." And perhaps they did. But in that peaceful valley, none of it mattered much. What mattered was the way Silas still brought Lyriel hot chocolate every evening, even after decades, placing the mug carefully in her hands before wrapping his arms around her. What mattered was how she leaned into him, her white hair streaked now with silver strands of age, her green glow softer but no less radiant, and whispered, "Thank you," as if she still couldn't believe he chose her. What mattered were the children's feet pounding across the grass, their voices rising in laughter, half human, half alien, entirely theirs. A new kind of being, born not of duty or design, but of love that refused to obey borders, species, or the cold rules of empires. Far away, the stars continued to turn. The Dominion faded into history, remembered only in school lessons as a warning against pride and purity. The verdant concordance thrived, guided by the principles Lyriel had lived. Growth over conquest, care over control. But in that quiet corner of Earth, untouched by time's harshness, life remained gentle. On clear nights, when the sky blazed with stars and the air smelled of jasmine and damp earth, Silas and Lyriel would walk hand in hand down the path to the river, watching their grandchildren splash in the shallows, their laughter ringing like bells. No crowns rested on their heads. No armies answered their call. But as they stood there, older now, weathered but unbroken, their hearts full of generations yet to come, they knew the truth. They had won, not through battle, not through fear, but through love that took root, spread wide, and changed everything. And so, beneath a sky dusted with endless stars, in a valley where flowers never stopped blooming and every breath tasted of peace, the once weak alien princess and the humble human botanist lived, not as legends, but as simply, beautifully home.